The night my parents called me a disappointment, the entire table went silent. Not the polite kind of silence people make when they don't know what to say. No. This was the kind of silence that cuts through your chest and stays there. My mother slowly placed her fork down on the plate and sighed the way people do when they're tired of pretending. Then she said the words that changed my life. Some children make their parents proud, she said coldly. And some just become a burden. My father didn't stop her. He didn't defend me. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and nodded. Your mother's right, Lysera, he said. That was the first time I heard my own father say my name like it was something he regretted. A woman like you will never succeed in this world. Around the table, my cousins stared at their plates. My younger brother smirked. And the worst part? No one said they were wrong. But what my parents didn't know that night was that exactly 12 months later, the same city they said I'd never succeed in would raise their hands and swear me in as its first female mayor. And when my parents tried to stand beside me for the cameras, I made a decision they would never forget. My name is Lysera Veilcrest, I'm 29 years old. Until that night, I had spent most of my life trying to earn the approval of people who had already decided I didn't deserve it. I grew up in a quiet industrial city called Thornbridge. It wasn't the kind of city that appeared on postcards. Factories lined the river. Most buildings were older than the people living inside them. And everyone knew everyone else's business. My parents were known in Thornbridge as respectable people. My father, Orvith Veilcrest, owned a chain of small construction supply stores. My mother, Marantha Veilcrest, ran charity events and social committees that made her look like the most generous woman in town. But behind the polished smiles and polite greetings, our house was a place where approval was given sparingly. And usually not to me. My younger brother, Cauldron, was their pride. He was confident, charming, and the type of man people liked within seconds. When Cauldron entered a room, my mother's face would light up. When I entered a room, she would often ask why I looked tired or why my hair wasn't better. Growing up, I thought if I worked harder, studied more, and tried to be better, eventually they would look at me the way they looked at him. So I did everything right. I studied political science. I volunteered at community shelters. I organized small neighborhood improvement projects. I spent years helping residents push the city council to repair broken streets and neglected parks. But to my parents, none of that mattered. Because in their eyes, I had failed at the one thing they believed defined success. Money. Community work doesn't pay bills, my father would say. You waste your time fixing other people's problems, my mother would add. You should have married someone important by now. Still, I kept trying. Until the night everything collapsed. The dinner was meant to celebrate my father's latest business expansion. He had opened a new warehouse on the east side of Thornbridge. Our extended family gathered at my parents' large dining table. There were 12 of us. Candles flickered softly across the polished wood. Plates clinked. People laughed. At first, everything seemed normal. Until my aunt asked a simple question. So, Lysera, she said casually, sipping her wine. What are you doing these days? I answered honestly. I've been organizing a campaign to get the city council to repair the West District drainage system. That project had taken me months. The flooding there had destroyed homes. Families were desperate. But before I could explain more, my father chuckled. Not a warm laugh. A dismissive one. Oh, that, he said. That's what she does now. The table grew quiet. My aunt frowned slightly. What do you mean? My father waved his hand. She plays politician. A few cousins laughed. I felt my stomach tighten. I'm not playing, I said calmly. I'm helping people. My mother sighed. The long, tired sigh she used whenever she believed I was embarrassing her. That's exactly the problem, Lycera, she said. You're nearly 30 and still pretending that idealism is a career. I stared at my plate. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I'm building community leadership experience, I replied quietly. My brother Cauldron smirked. For what? He asked. I looked at him. To make change. That's when my father leaned forward. His voice dropped low enough that everyone at the table had to listen carefully. You're not changing anything, he said. You're wasting your life. The room fell silent. My chest tightened. I care about this city, I said. And people here trust me. My mother placed her fork down slowly. Then she looked directly at me. Her eyes were cold. Trust doesn't mean success, she said. Then came the sentence I would never forget. Some children make their parents proud. She paused. And some become a disappointment. My hands froze. I waited for someone to say something. Anyone. But the room remained silent. My father leaned back in his chair. Your mother's right, he said. A woman like you will never succeed in this world. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter. Something sharp. For years, I had been trying to prove them wrong. But that night, I realized something. They weren't waiting for proof. They had already decided who I was. And they were never going to change their minds. So I did something they weren't expecting. I stood up. Calmly. Slowly. I hope one day you'll be proud of me, I said. Then I walked out of the house. What my parents didn't know was that the humiliation of that dinner would become the most powerful motivation of my life. Because 3 weeks later, something happened in Thornbridge that changed everything. And for the first time, people started asking a question no one had ever asked before. Why isn't Lycera running the city? Before I continue, please take a moment to like, share, and leave a comment only if the story triggers something in you. 3 weeks after that dinner, Thornbridge woke up to the kind of news that spreads through a city like wildfire. At first it was only whispers. Then phone calls. Then headlines. By noon, every cafe, grocery store, and street corner in Thornbridge was talking about the same thing. The city council had been caught in a corruption investigation. For years, residents had complained that public funds meant for road repairs, water systems, and housing improvements seemed to disappear without explanation. Now the truth was finally surfacing. Contracts had been handed to private companies connected to certain council members. Maintenance budgets had been diverted. Entire districts had been ignored while money flowed into projects that benefited only a few wealthy developers. People were furious. For many residents, the news confirmed something they had long suspected. The city they loved had been quietly mismanaged for years. And suddenly, Thornbridge found itself facing a leadership crisis. The current mayor announced he would not run for re-election. Several council members resigned. Trust in local government collapsed almost overnight. But amid all the chaos, something unexpected began happening. People started mentioning my name. At first I didn't hear about it directly. My phone began receiving messages from volunteers I had worked with on community projects. Neighbors. Local organizers. Even small business owners I barely knew. Lycera, you should run. You already know the problems better than anyone. We need someone honest. I ignored the first few messages. Politics was a brutal world. And I knew exactly what my parents would say if I even suggested it. But the messages kept coming. Then one afternoon, I received a call from someone who changed everything. Her name was Sarithia Kelmer. She was a retired school principal who had spent 40 years educating children in Thornbridge's public schools. I had worked with her during a neighborhood literacy program. When Sarithia spoke, people listened. "Lysera," she said calmly over the phone. "This city needs new leadership." I laughed nervously. "I'm not a politician." "That's exactly why we need you." I hesitated. "You know what people will say." Her voice softened. "People already trust you. They've seen the work you've done." I stared out the window of my small apartment. Outside, rain was falling softly on the cracked sidewalks of the West District, the same district where flooding had damaged dozens of homes. "I'm not powerful enough for something like that," I said quietly. Sarithia's response came immediately. "Power isn't what makes a leader, Lysera. Courage does." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. That night, I walked through the West District again. Broken drains. Flickering streetlights. Stores boarded up after repeated flooding. Residents who had begged the city council for help for years. Many of them recognized me. They waved. Some stopped to talk. A shop owner named Adrivan Solkar shook his head as we looked at the damaged street outside his store. "We've asked the council for repairs 5 times, he said. "No one listens." Then he looked directly at me. "You do." That sentence echoed in my mind all night. The next morning, I did something that terrified me. I announced my campaign. The announcement wasn't glamorous. There were no large stages or expensive banners. Just a small gathering at a community center in the West District. About 40 people showed up. Most of them were volunteers I had worked with before. Neighbors. Teachers. Small business owners. I stood in front of them with a simple microphone. My hands trembled slightly. But when I began speaking, something inside me steadied. "Thornbridge deserves leadership that listens," I said. "For too long, decisions about our city have been made without the voices of the people who actually live here." The room grew quiet. I continued. "We deserve safe streets, reliable infrastructure, and a government that works for the community, not private interests." Then I said the words that officially began the fight. "I'm running for mayor." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the room erupted into applause. It wasn't a large crowd. But the energy inside that room felt bigger than the entire city. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt before. Belief. Not from my parents. Not from people trying to judge me. But from ordinary residents who wanted change. What I didn't know yet was that the hardest part of the journey was about to begin. 2 days later, my parents found out. I hadn't planned on telling them personally. But Thornbridge was a small city. News traveled fast. I received a phone call from my father that evening. His voice was sharp. "What ridiculous rumor did I just hear?" I stayed calm. "It's not a rumor." There was a long pause. Then he laughed. Not a warm laugh. The same dismissive laugh he had used at the dinner table. "You," he said. "Running for mayor?" My mother's voice appeared faintly in the background. "What is she saying?" My father covered the phone briefly, then returned. "Your mother thinks this is embarrassing." I felt the familiar sting. But this time, something inside me refused to shrink. "I'm doing this for the city." "You're humiliating our family," he snapped. I took a deep breath. "I'm trying to help people." "You're trying to become something you're not." Then came the sentence that spread through Thornbridge faster than my campaign announcement. "If you run," my father said coldly, "you will lose. And when you do, everyone will finally see what we've known all along." "What's that?" I asked quietly. "That you're not capable of real success." The line went silent. He had hung up. I stood in my apartment for a long time after that. His words echoed in my mind. But strangely, they didn't weaken me. They hardened something inside me. If I lost, they would be right. But if I won, the entire city would prove them wrong. Running a campaign without money is like trying to build a house with bare hands. My opponents had wealthy donors, professional teams, advertising budgets. I had volunteers, homemade flyers, and a borrowed office above a bakery. But something unexpected began happening. People started joining us. Students, retired workers, shop owners, teachers. They weren't interested in political games. They just wanted someone who would finally fix the problems everyone had been living with for years. We knocked on doors, held small neighborhood meetings, listened to residents describe issues that had been ignored for decades. Slowly, something began shifting. Local newspapers started mentioning my campaign. At first it was small articles, then longer interviews. Then something surprising happened. A public poll placed me second among all candidates. Second. I stared at the numbers in disbelief. But the biggest shock came 2 weeks later. A headline appeared in the Thornbridge Chronicle. Community organizer Sarah Vailcrest emerges as unexpected mayoral contender. My campaign team celebrated. But somewhere else in Thornbridge, someone was furious. My parents. And what they did next nearly destroyed my campaign before it truly began. The first real sign that my parents intended to stop me came from a place I least expected. The local newspaper. 3 weeks into my campaign, the Thornbridge Chronicle published an opinion column that appeared on the front page of its political section. The title read, "Inexperience is not leadership." At first glance, it looked like a normal political opinion piece. But the moment I started reading it, my stomach dropped. The article described a mayoral candidate who was naively idealistic, economically inexperienced, dangerously unqualified to lead a city. The writer never mentioned my name directly. But everyone in Thornbridge knew exactly who it was about. Then I reached the final paragraph. And my heart sank. The article was written by Orvith Vailcrest, my father. I read the column 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood. But the message was clear. He wasn't just doubting me privately anymore. He had decided to humiliate me publicly. Within hours, the article spread across Thornbridge. Radio hosts discussed it. Local business owners debated it in cafes. Neighbors forwarded the link through community message groups. And everywhere the same question appeared. Why would a father publicly attack his own daughter? My campaign team gathered in our tiny office above the bakery. Sarithia held the newspaper in silence. Finally she looked up at me. "How are you holding up?" I forced a small smile. "I expected resistance," I said. But inside, something hurt far deeper than I wanted to admit. Political opponents attacking me would have been normal. But my own father? That was something else. Volunteer coordinator Talvin Myrick slammed his hand on the table. "This is low," he said. "He's trying to destroy your credibility." Another volunteer shook her head. "People will think if your own parents don't believe in you, why should they?" For the first time since announcing my campaign, doubt crept into my mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe the city would listen to my father more than they would listen to me. But something surprising happened the next morning. The Thornbridge Chronicle printed a second article. This time, it wasn't written by a businessman. It was written by Sarithia Kelmer. The title read, "Leadership is not measured by approval." In the article, Sarithia wrote about the years she had watched me work with struggling families, organize neighborhood improvements, and stand beside residents when the city council ignored them. She ended the piece with one simple sentence. A leader is not defined by the opinions of powerful people, but by the trust of ordinary citizens. That article changed everything. Within 2 days, local residents began posting messages of support online. Community leaders spoke publicly in my defense. Even people who had never met me before began saying something remarkable. If her own parents can't see her value, that says more about them than it does about her. My campaign didn't collapse. It grew stronger. And that made my parents even angrier. 2 weeks later, my mother called me. Her voice was unusually calm. "Lysera," she said. "We should talk." I hesitated. "What about?" "This situation you've created." I almost laughed. But curiosity got the better of me. We agreed to meet at their house. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt heavy. My father sat in the living room. My mother stood beside the window. And my brother Cauldron leaned casually against the wall. No one smiled. My father spoke first. "You've made quite a spectacle of yourself." I stayed calm. "I'm running a campaign. You're embarrassing our family name." I crossed my arms. "I'm trying to improve this city." My mother shook her head slowly. "You still don't understand." "What?" She walked closer. "This world doesn't reward people like you." "People like you." The phrase felt strangely familiar. "People who chase idealism instead of power," she continued. "You don't have the connections. You don't have the experience. And most importantly," she paused, "you don't have the personality." My brother chuckled. "You're not a leader, Lysera," he said. "You're a volunteer." I looked at each of them. For a moment, the same old feelings tried to return. The need to defend myself. The desire to make them understand. But something inside me had changed. I realized something simple. They didn't want to understand. They wanted to win. Then my father delivered his final warning. "If you continue this campaign," he said coldly, "we will publicly support another candidate." The room went silent. That meant they were willing to actively campaign against me. "Why?" I asked quietly. My mother answered without hesitation. "Because watching you fail quietly is one thing. But watching you embarrass our family on a public stage," she folded her arms, "is unacceptable." I looked at them for a long moment. Then I nodded slowly. "Thank you." My father frowned. "For what?" "For finally being honest." Then I turned and walked out. And as I stepped outside into the evening air, something became clear to me. My parents weren't just doubting me anymore. They were fighting me. Which meant this campaign had just become something far bigger than politics. It had become a battle for my identity. And I had no intention of losing. 3 weeks later, the city released a new mayoral poll. My campaign team gathered around a laptop in the bakery office. Talvrin refreshed the page. Then he froze. "Lysera." My heart pounded. "What?" He slowly turned the screen toward me. I stared at the numbers. For a moment I couldn't speak. Because the impossible had happened. I wasn't second anymore. I was leading. The entire room erupted with cheers. Volunteers hugged each other. Someone knocked over a stack of flyers. But while the room celebrated, I thought about one thing. The dinner table. The silence. The words my parents had spoken. "A woman like you will never succeed." For the first time in my life, the entire city was proving them wrong. But the hardest moment of this story was still ahead. Because the election debate was coming. And during that debate, my own father would attempt something that nearly destroyed my campaign forever. By the time the official mayoral debate arrived, Thornbridge had become a city divided. Every cafe conversation eventually turned to the election. Every neighborhood meeting ended with the same question. Can Sarah Vailcrest really win? Some people believed in me completely. Others were still unsure. But one thing was certain. No one was ignoring my campaign anymore. The debate would be broadcast live on local television and streamed online for residents across the city. For many voters, it would be the moment they decided who deserved to lead Thornbridge. And I knew something else. My parents would be watching. The debate took place in the old Thornbridge Civic Auditorium, a tall stone building that had hosted decades of political events. Hundreds of residents filled the seats. Journalists sat along the front row. Cameras stood on tripods across the room. There were 4 candidates in total. A former deputy mayor named Valdric Tormain, known for his political connections. A wealthy property developer named Severin Halvick, who promised aggressive economic expansion. A retired police chief named Orkin Var, running on a law and order platform. And then there was me. The community organizer. The candidate most political analysts had dismissed at the beginning. As we took our seats on stage, bright lights shone down on the podiums. The moderator introduced each candidate. When my name was announced, applause filled the room. Not overwhelming, but strong enough to send a wave of encouragement through my chest. The debate began with standard questions. Infrastructure. Public safety. Economic development. Each candidate delivered polished responses. Valdric spoke like a seasoned politician. Severin used statistics about investment and growth. Orkin emphasized security and discipline. When my turn came, I spoke about people. About neighborhoods that had been ignored. About residents who deserved a government that actually listened. At first, everything was going smoothly. Then the moderator asked a question that changed everything. The moderator adjusted his glasses and looked down at a card. Our next question concerns leadership credibility, he said. He turned toward me. Ms. Vailcrest, some critics argue that while your community work is admirable, you lack the experience necessary to manage a city government. I expected that question. But the moderator continued. Earlier this month, a local business leader published a column expressing those concerns. My chest tightened. I already knew where this was going. The moderator looked up. That columnist is your father, Orvith Vailcrest. Murmurs spread through the audience. The moderator continued carefully. Ms. Vailcrest, how do you respond to the argument that even your own father believes you are not qualified to lead? The room fell silent. For a moment, my mind flashed back to the dinner table. The candles. The silence. The words that had cut deeper than anything before. You're a disappointment. But this time, I wasn't sitting quietly at a table. I was standing in front of the entire city. I leaned slightly toward the microphone. My father is entitled to his opinion, I said calmly. But leadership is not decided at a family dinner table. A few people in the audience chuckled. Encouraged, I continued. Leadership is decided by the people who live in this city. Applause erupted across the hall. But the moderator wasn't finished. Ms. Vailcrest, he said carefully, your father is actually present in the audience tonight. A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. I felt my stomach drop. Slowly, cameras turned toward the audience. And there he was. My father stood up. Confident. Calm. Exactly the way he looked when running one of his business meetings. The moderator nodded toward him. Mr. Vailcrest, would you like to speak? The debate rules allowed brief audience comments. My father walked toward a microphone placed along the aisle. My heart pounded. The entire city was watching. My father adjusted the microphone. "Good evening," he said smoothly. His voice carried the same authority he used in business presentations. "I want to make something clear." The audience listened closely. "I love my daughter." But the way he said it sounded less like love and more like an explanation. "However," he continued, "love does not blind me to reality." A few murmurs spread through the crowd. "My daughter is passionate," he said. "But passion is not leadership." He paused. "Running a city requires experience, discipline, and the ability to make difficult decisions." Then he delivered the sentence he knew would hit hardest. "And in my professional judgment, Lycera simply does not possess those qualities." Gasps rippled through the audience. The moderators looked stunned. Cameras turned back toward me. For a moment, everything inside me went quiet. Not angry. Not hurt. Just still. Because suddenly I understood something. My father wasn't just trying to defeat me. He was trying to prove that his version of me was correct. The weak daughter. The disappointment. The one who could never succeed. I looked out at the audience. Then I looked at him. And I realized something else. For the first time in my life, I didn't need his approval. I stepped away from my podium, walked to the front of the stage, and spoke directly to the audience. "My father is a successful businessman," I said. "He built companies, managed employees, created wealth." I nodded respectfully toward him. "And those achievements deserve recognition." He looked slightly surprised. But then I continued. "But cities are not businesses." The room grew quiet again. A business measures success by profit. A city measures success by people. I looked across the audience. By the safety of neighborhoods. By the strength of schools. By whether families feel heard by their leaders. Then I paused. "My father says I don't have leadership qualities." I took a breath. Maybe he's right about one thing. The audience leaned forward. "I'm not the leader he expected me to be." I smiled slightly. "I'm the leader this city deserves." The room exploded into applause. People stood. Some cheered. Even the other candidates looked stunned. For the first time that night, my father didn't speak. He simply stood there, silent. And as the applause echoed through the auditorium, something became clear. That moment had changed the election. But the real karma for my parents was still coming. Because on election night, something would happen that they never imagined. And the entire city would watch it unfold. The night of the election arrived faster than anyone expected. For months, Thornbridge had been filled with debates, campaign flyers, community meetings, and endless conversations about the future of the city. Now everything came down to a single evening. Votes had been cast. Ballots were sealed. And soon the entire city would know who its next mayor would be. Our campaign team gathered in the same place where everything had begun, the small office above the bakery. The room that once felt cramped and temporary now felt like the center of something much bigger. Volunteers filled every corner. Pizza boxes sat on the tables. Phones buzzed with messages from supporters across the city. Despite the excitement, the tension was heavy. No one truly knew what would happen. Polls had shown the race was extremely close between me and Valdric Tormain, the former deputy mayor. Either of us could win. I stood near the window looking out at the city lights of Thornbridge. 12 months ago, I had walked out of my parents' house believing I might never prove them wrong. Now thousands of residents had placed their hopes in me. Cerethia approached quietly and stood beside me. "You've already changed this city," she said softly. "No matter what happens tonight." I smiled. Let's hope the voters agree. At 8 p.m., the first results began appearing on the television screen. Precincts from the outer districts reported first. The numbers appeared slowly. Valdric led by a small margin. The room fell silent. Talvrin refreshed the election website repeatedly. More precincts reported. The gap narrowed. Then a major district reported results from the west side, the neighborhood where my campaign had started. The numbers appeared. Lysera Valecrest, 62%. Valdric Tormain, 34%. Cheers erupted across the room. Volunteers hugged each other. But the race wasn't over. More results poured in from across Thornbridge. For nearly an hour, the numbers swung back and forth. Every update made our hearts pound faster. Finally, the largest central district reported its results. Talvrin stared at the screen. Then slowly turned toward me. His eyes widened. Lysera. My chest tightened. What? He pointed to the television. The anchor on screen looked stunned. Ladies and gentlemen, she said. With 93% of precincts reporting, we can now project the winner of the Thornbridge mayoral election. The room held its breath. Lysera Valecrest will become the next mayor of Thornbridge. For a moment, the entire world felt silent. Then the room exploded. People shouted. Some cried. Others clapped so loudly the sound echoed off the walls. Talvrin grabbed my shoulders. You did it. But I barely heard him. Because the words from a year ago echoed in my mind. You will never succeed. Within an hour, reporters gathered outside the community center where our campaign had held its first announcement. A podium stood under bright lights. Cameras lined the front row. Supporters filled the street. As I stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into cheers. The sound rolled through the night like thunder. I looked out across the people of Thornbridge. Teachers. Shop owners. Students. Families. People who had believed in me when others didn't. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I stepped to the microphone. Tonight, I began, Thornbridge made history. Applause erupted again. For the first time in our city's history, a woman has been elected mayor. Cheers echoed across the street. But my voice softened as I continued. This victory does not belong to me alone. It belongs to every resident who believed this city could be better. It belongs to every volunteer who knocked on doors and shared our message. And it belongs to every person who refused to believe that change was impossible. The crowd applauded again. Then something unexpected happened. Movement appeared near the side of the stage. I glanced over. And my breath caught. My parents were there. My father stood near the press line. My mother beside him. Both wearing polite smiles. They slowly walked toward the stage. Reporters immediately noticed. Cameras turned. Microphones followed them. Someone whispered loudly. That's the mayor's parents. They climbed the steps toward the platform. My father reached out as if to embrace me for the cameras. But in that moment, something inside me became very clear. For years they had treated me like a disappointment. They had mocked my work. Publicly attacked my campaign. And told the entire city I would fail. Yet now that I had succeeded, they wanted to share the spotlight. I gently stepped back. The crowd noticed. The reporters noticed. My father froze. Confusion crossed his face. I leaned toward the microphone again. And spoke calmly. My parents are here tonight. The crowd watched silently. I continued. They taught me something important growing up. My mother's smile widened slightly. Perhaps she thought I was about to thank them. But the next words surprised everyone. They taught me what it feels like when someone doubts your worth. The crowd grew very quiet. And that experience shaped the leader I became. Cameras flashed rapidly. I promised myself that if I ever held a position of leadership, I would never make another person feel that way. The audience slowly began applauding. Then louder. Then louder still. My father lowered his hand. My mother's smile faded. And in that moment, the entire city understood the truth. The daughter they had called a disappointment had just become the most powerful leader Thornbridge had ever elected. Months later, after I had officially taken office as mayor, something unexpected happened. My father's construction supply business began struggling. Several city contracts he had expected to receive were reviewed under new transparency policies. The same policies my administration introduced. The city would no longer award contracts based on connections. Only merit. For the first time in decades, companies had to compete fairly. One afternoon, my assistant entered my office. "Mayor Valecrest," she said. "There's someone here requesting a meeting." "Who?" She hesitated. "Orvith Valecrest." "My father." I sat quietly for a moment. Then nodded. "Send him in." When he entered the office, he looked different. Not weak, but less certain than I had ever seen him before. He sat across from my desk. For a moment neither of us spoke. Finally he cleared his throat. "You've done well," he said. It was the closest thing to praise he had ever given me. I smiled slightly. "Thank you." He looked around the office. Then back at me. "I suppose I misjudged you." For a long time, I had imagined hearing those words. Now they didn't feel as powerful as I once thought. Because I no longer needed them. "I hope the city proves worthy of your leadership," he said quietly. I nodded. "It already has." And as he stood to leave, I realized something important. The greatest revenge in life isn't humiliating the people who doubted you. It's building a life so meaningful that their doubt no longer matters. 12 months earlier, my parents had called me a disappointment. Now the entire city called me something else. Mayor Lucera Valecrest.